The name is bridges. There is a bridge. There's a universal bridge. There is an organizational bridge. Bridges for Peace, or Hayuvel, I would argue, is a bridge for peace as well. But also, every one of us has an individual calling and mandate. If we're in this room, we have a calling to be a bridge ourselves. And if God has a place for each one of us, it is unique. And it doesn't have to look like anyone on this stage or any other stage. It is uniquely for you. It is based on the things that God has placed in you and the journey that you're on, where He will stretch you into the places where He wants you to be. So it is yours. It is also only attainable in community. You don't run off, the American thing about going off and, be your own person, leave everybody else behind. No, it is God's way also to connect in community, in relationship, as Christians. And of course, we're talking about bridges. So we'll get to the relationship with Jews in a moment. Okay, that's the first word, bridges. Second word, for. When you interact with people, people can be for you, or you may need to be for them. I won't say that they're against you. I'll say that you need to be for them. If people are for you, here's something that I'm learning. That being willing to expose yourself as a learner is more attractive than showing yourself as learning. Now, every person in this room, when you're talking to someone, 99% of the time you're going to know more than what they do. You are more learning. But what I'm saying is, what I've noticed is that being willing to talk about things, but in the context of what God is showing you now, is a wonderful way. People who are for you, their heart will be drawn to that kind of attitude. Now, when you run up against replacement theology, there's different levels of how for you people will be. And you have to meet full aggression with facts, as we were learning in the first session, right? But I'd like to just give you a model to think about when you interact with people and you're worried about what's going to happen with replacement theology or how to deal with it. You can never know enough, right? So it's a matter of trusting God. You're on your journey, and God will bring to you and the things that He will help you deal with. But there's a model that I've been thinking about lately, and it looks like this. I see a circle. When I interact with a person or a group, I'm thinking of the circle. Where are they? The circle is the things in which they hold dear. Where they are with Israel is in the circle. And this idea is that to give them something in the circle, give them something on the edge, and if you dare, give them something beyond, to take them a new place. For instance, very practically, if the person is absolutely against Israel, I will start with the land. If they're a Christian, I will start with God's promise to the land, to the people. That is my first step. If that's in their circle, I'll move to the next step. What about God's promise for the Jews to return? Okay? If they'll accept that, I'll move to the next step. Is God actively working in the nation state of Israel? If they'll take that, then I'll move on to what does relationship look like? You see? Okay. But the idea is to understand where people are. Try to give them something in their circle, on the edge, and beyond the edge. And the last word is peace. Bridges for peace. And of course, peace is the American, the English word for shalom. And of course, we know that shalom is a completeness, a wholeness. What does wholeness look like? I would like to demonstrate the circle with this group. I'd like to give you something regarding Israel and the Jews that's in the circle. I'd like to try to give you something on the edge and maybe something that will push the boundaries of some. The first is that right in the center, wholeness requires relationship. It's no longer about going out and learning Jewish things just on Wikipedia. It requires relationship. How rich it's been to be in relationship with Gidon and others. It's changed my entire perspective. It's enriched me tremendously. Relationship. That should be in your circle if you're in this room. Okay, let me give you something on the edge. The Balfour Declaration, fantastic. I came to Israel because this trip, to be here for this, such an important event. But the Balfour Declaration, I was thinking about it, it's one way. It was a declaration from the British government to the Jewish people. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But I believe that the times in which we are in, that the days of one-way declarations are over. What does a two-way declaration look like? I'd like you to look to the left side of the stage and you see a banner. What's it say? Israel 365. Look at the right side. What's it say? Bridges for Peace. This is a two-way declaration. This day that we're in right now is a two-way declaration. Okay? That should be on the edge. You know where we are. We're on the edge. Okay. Now, let me press the boundaries. I personally believe that in the days ahead of us, beyond the Balfour Declaration, that God is going to bless with great favor those things that, those initiatives that come out of the Jewish community that are joined in by the Christian community. Okay, so starting with the Jews, the root source that he mentioned, it was his idea. And I felt God called me to join with his idea. So anyway, that's how I would speak to you directly. Bridges for Peace. What a wonderful name. What a wonderful way to remember how we should interact with love. Regarding the Balfour, I have a big picture theory that in 1517, God started a time clock. Both for the Ottoman Empire taking Jerusalem, 1517, and the Protestant Reformation, they started a clock, and he said, perhaps 1492 wasn't too much earlier, with the Spanish expulsion of the Jews. But anyway, I think God said, I've had enough. I'm starting my clock. I'm going to bring my people home. 400 years to the day. 400 years to the day of the Protestant Reformation came the Beersheba battle, and as we now know, Balfour was actually signed in on that very same day. And where is the number 400 in the Bible? Yes. In Genesis chapter 15, thank you, Sandra, that God said to Abraham, your descendants will be enslaved for 400 years, but then they will come out. 400 years. 400 years. It's right there. Just so obvious. Now, that was 1917, but the real state of Israel didn't happen until the UN voted it in on November 29th, 1947. That's 430 years. Is 430 years in the Bible? Yeah, how about Exodus? Exodus chapter 12, when God said that the children of Israel were enslaved in Egypt for 430 years. Well, wait, we just said 400. Well, it's the sons of Israel. The way the Jews see this, I never knew this until I began to relate to Gidon, is that was when God gave the covenant to Abraham to leave Ur of the Chaldees. So he left 430 years before the Exodus. Isaac was born 400 years before the Exodus. So you have both in play. And my last point, because I'm out of time, is we are now 500 years from that of 1517. So what is the message for us today, 500 years? 500 doesn't, it appears in Scripture, but it isn't overt. In order to get to the 500, you have to look into the deeper story. How old was Abraham? In Jewish theology, in Jewish thinking, how old was Abraham when he was called out of Ur? 70. So you add 70 years to 430, and you get 500. So in a way, in this unusual sort of symmetrical replay of history backwards, we're at the year of the birthday of Abraham. I think that this is some kind of big birth thing going on. I don't think it's not as visible, just as Abraham's birth wasn't known and famous, but something is happening in this time. So I'm very excited to be part of it. Thank you.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Of course, Abraham was born in the year of creation, 1948.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Bob. Becky, Bridges for Peace just celebrated its Jubilee along with Jerusalem, and it was such an awesome blessing to be a part of that. In your many years as a forerunner in this area, please share what you've seen in regard to Christians moving away from replacement theology, and how will this radical, paradigm-shifting trend in Christian Zionism shape Israel's development and role in the world in the future? Just a small question.
I'm probably going to do what Joan said, just walk around it. That's fine. So, the name bridges, a bridge is a connector, and in Hebrew, a bridge is a gesher, and a very similar word is a kesher, very similar sounding anyway. And I'm seeing in all that we're talking about today that there's lots of connections. I think you're seeing that in the things that have just been said. And of course, we're remembering 100 years since Balfour. But I say we really need to go back 4,000 years, because that's where the connection starts, because that's when God said to Abraham, I'm going to give you this land, and he decreed it as an everlasting, eternal inheritance. But unfortunately, sadly, tragically, the deeply ingrained teaching of replacement theology and supersessionism was transferred. The press was the Bible, that the Protestant world, and in fact Lord Balfour and all the Christian Zionists that came out of that whole movement, that they got their legs. Because until then, people didn't read the Bible for themselves. It was interpreted by priests who told you what to believe. And then suddenly, Christians are reading the Bible. And as they're reading the Bible, they're encountering the idea of Israel. It's on almost every page. Well, some became early Christian Zionists, and that was wonderful. And Lord Balfour was one of them, and others that we've heard about today. They were some of them, but still, most of the Christian world continued to hold the belief that the church had replaced Israel. And then one day that changed. And that day was May 14, 1948. My dad was a little boy living in South Dakota in a little town, 2,000 people in this town. And it was 1941. In 1941, a man came from Germany, a man named Hans Brettschneider, and he spoke in the little church my father attended with his family. And he said, the Bible says that the Jewish people will be gathered from all over the world and they will be reestablished in their ancient homeland. And my dad said the people of this little town laughed at this man. They said, man, you're a fool. That is never going to happen. Why, don't you know that God is finished with the Jews? Don't you know that we are the new Israel? Replacement theology was in this little rural town. In fact, the only thing that happened that was exciting was how high the corn was. You know, nothing happened. So fast forward, my father's in high school, and it's May 14th, 1948, and someone got on the loudspeaker in this little town, in this little high school, and announced that Israel had become a nation. And my father said every hair on his body stood straight up, because suddenly he realized that the Bible was real, the Bible was true, and that the God of the Bible was going to keep his ancient promises to his people Israel. Wow. And a seismic shift had occurred. In the past 70 years, many Christians have been grappling with our own theology. Some are realizing that replacement theology and the related charge of deicide has caused untold suffering to the Jewish people, something which causes me and all of Bridges for Peace great sorrow. You know, I wish I could go back and change the past, but until some enterprising Israeli invents time travel, I think that's impossible. So I tell my team all the time, we can change the future. We can change the future, and I believe this is part of that. For more than 50 years since our founder moved to Israel, we've been working to educate the Jews about these false doctrines. And we do see that many Bible-believing Christians, especially those that read the Bible literally rather than allegorically, are supportive of Israel. And I believe that this support is genuine and is coming from the heart, and its motivation is a love for the God of Israel, a desire to honor him, and a realization that there are things that he loves. Now, the Christian world is huge. We have more than 36,000 denominations. You know why? Because we disagree. I'm unable to sit here and tell you how many have moved away from replacement theology. I don't think anyone knows. But we do know, as we speak out for Israel in the nations, that it is not dead. We repeatedly encounter this theology, and it is prevalent in the Christian world. Many don't even know what the term replacement theology is, but they still teach some of its tenets. So I would say that we are on a journey. We're encouraged to see the progress, but there is a long way to go. There are certain deeply felt convictions in each of our communities that make us uncomfortable, and we've heard some of that today. Well, at Bridges for Peace, we're committed to unconditional support and friendship of the Jewish people. We recognize that there is desire in the Jewish community that we accept them as they are, and we do. But we do so as Christians, and we cannot deny our own faith. And we understand that there are conflicts between the two faith systems. But at Bridges for Peace, we have chosen to concentrate on the many things we have in common and leave final status issues to God. We share the Tanakh. We share our belief in the Creator. We all believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We believe that God is merciful, loving, and forgiving in nature. We share a deep love of the Psalms. We share a hope for a future messianic age. Okay, we don't agree on the identity of the Messiah, but we all do believe that there's a Messiah. And when he comes, some will surely ask him, is this your first or your second visit? Now, as Cooley said earlier, one of the things which is very distasteful to our Jewish friends is evangelism. Now, for the Jewish people in the room, I need to tell you something. Most Christians aren't aware that they're causing offense when they share the most important thing in their life. In fact, they believe they're acting in love. And many today have little knowledge of past actions like forced conversions. In fact, in the evangelical world, we don't even understand why this was a practice, but because for us it's a heart relationship with God, and that cannot be forced. So on occasion, we're asked to agree that Christians should not evangelize. And I have to say that as Christians and Jews, we actually understand evangelize or proselytize sometimes very differently. And it makes it very challenging to formalize a statement on this topic without someone from one audience or the other getting upset, maybe even feeling betrayed. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do and what we say. Since our founding, we have sought to build honest, unconditional friendships between Christians and Jews. And as with any true friendship, or as Bob said, relationship, we will firmly promise that we will not try to force our view on anybody, not try to change their religion. We will not bribe people, we won't lie, we won't twist arms, we won't force, we won't coerce, we won't trick anyone into hearing about our beliefs or trying to change theirs. Period. No exceptions. We unreservedly affirm that replacement theology is wrong theology, and that the God of Israel has never forgotten or abandoned his love and his promises to Israel and the Jewish people. And we constantly remind other Christians that if God could or would do such a thing, then how could we possibly believe that he could hold promises which we hold dear? Now, we do seek true, meaningful friendships between Christians and Jews, and we do believe that the ball is in the Christian court to earn this friendship. In so many ways, for so many years, Christians have been not been honest, supporting friends of the Jewish community. And I can't tell you how deeply we regret that. We also hope, and it is our experience, that over time, as true relationship, true friendships develop, that friends do talk about everything that is important to them. And we believe that friends have much to gain from honest exchanges with true friends about the matters we each hold true and dear. So we're learning from our Jewish friends, and we're loving that. I just have a couple more things to say that I think are important. We believe that Bible-believing Jews and Bible-believing Christians both seek the truth about God and understanding his word. So, you know what? We can't promise to never have conversations with our friends, particularly when they ask us what we think or how we believe about something. But we can promise that we have no hidden agenda and that we trust God to speak to each heart and work as he will. And the friendships that we have developed between Christians and Jews are a great blessing to us, without anyone changing their mind about key tenets of their faith. I believe that there is a glorious future for Israel as she steps into the God-ordained role and to be a light to the nations. And we will all be cheering as we trust God to work in all the world with his redemptive purposes. In the meantime, we continue to share with Christians around the world about the need to recognize God's work, to bring the Jewish people home to Israel, to reestablish the state, and to understand the great love he has for his people Israel. For 2,000 years, the church has wanted the blessings of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel. And now we need to recognize that there is also an Israel of God.
Thank you so much, Becky. Sandra, you are a pioneer. Where are you a pioneer? In support of the return of the Jewish people to the biblical heartland. And you're also a pioneer in enlisting Christian support for that. So that's two pretty major areas. The past 50 years has led to great settlement efforts, but also great debate and international scrutiny, which can be attributed to ignorance, anti-Semitism, and replacement theology. What can each of us do to help shine the light of truth into those still remaining vestiges of replacement theology?
Okay, I am going to try to answer the question, because I don't like to move around. No, but I do want to just preface that by saying, for me, most of what people were talking about today here on the panel and for the entire day really was about Christian-Jewish relations and how Christians and Jews are now in a new time of understanding one another, communicating with one another, being friends with one another, and all with this common goal of helping and supporting Israel. And very often, just from my own personal story, I landed in this issue of Christian-Jewish relations completely by accident. I too grew up in a bit of a bubble, like the other Jews who spoke here today. Although quite aware of the Christians around me in terms of, I just knew everybody does Christmas and we went to see the pretty lights. But, that was about it. But to me, my passion, what burned so strong for me, was my love for the land of Israel, for the people of Israel. I moved to Israel from purely, religious and ideological reasons. And once I got here, immediately started building a house in Samaria and have been an advocate for the settlement movement, for the right of the Jews to live in Judea and Samaria ever since I've been in Israel. And it was through that work that I encountered Christians. And this, for me, was really a very special thing, because our issue, the settlement issue, is not only a very controversial issue, but it's an issue that has almost no support outside of Israel. And that is true, unfortunately, of the Jewish community as well as of the community at large. And this was particularly the case back in, the 80s, when the settlement movement at that time was extremely small, or relatively small. It had grown certainly since 1967, when there wasn't a single Jew living in Israel. But in the 80s, we had maybe, 60,000 Jews, 70,000 Jews. It was really a small number. And so it was seen as very vulnerable. When I encountered Christians who not only supported the right of Jews to live and thrive in Judea and Samaria, but came to that approach from a biblical point of view, I was just, ecstatic. Because it enabled me to communicate with this audience, which I was at that point just getting to know, from the real depths of my soul. All these years that I had been advocating for the settlement movement, and I was part of a number of friends who did it, and I actually am very happy to see one of my mentors here in the audience, Israel Medad, who was doing this before me, and somebody that I learned from when I first came to Israel. It was just known that if you're going to go out there and try to, when you're talking to the press, and there was no CNN, by the way, but they were all other bad guys, And when you're talking to the New York Times or the Washington Post, when you were talking to any of the television stations anywhere in the world, it was just known, you don't mention God. You want to blow yourself out of the water? Talk about, this is my land because God gave it to me. You start talking like that, people are going to roll their eyes and say, we got another religious fanatic next, right? And so really, the issue of the controversy, we weren't addressing replacement theology. We weren't addressing Christianity in either its pro or its anti form. We were addressing secular, and in fact, secular claims against Israel in general, and specifically the settlement movement, are very, very potent. And in response to your question, I need to address both. I'm going to turn to you and say, what can you do to change this understanding? What can you do to help us gain allies and friends around the world? I think we have to not only address the challenges of replacement theology, which you will encounter in certain Christian audiences, but you also have to figure out what to do to encounter the secular as well. And they are not unrelated. Okay? And I think this is something that we really have to, if we're going to be honest, if we're going to look at the situation, we have to understand that replacement theology is influencing the secular world, and the secular world is influencing replacement theology, certainly when it comes to Israel. And I want to give you a few examples of that. Going back a number of years already, there's an organization that I think Israel just recently threw out of Israel. I hope they're still thrown out. And I always forget their name, but it's something like Ecumenical Accompaniers for Palestinians and Israel. I don't know if any of you know what I'm talking about. EPP something. Right, them. Really not good people. But they may think they're good, and maybe they have kind wishes towards humanity, but they're not good for Israel. Okay? This is an organization that is by definition, a Christian organization, and they operate under the auspices of the World Council of Churches. Okay? They come to Israel for a few months, or they were until they got thrown out. But they would come to Israel for 3 months at a time, using a tourist visa. They would go into Palestinian villages, spend time with Palestinians, and they were there to help protect the Palestinians in their encounters with the Israeli authorities. So you can imagine already the assumption that these people are operating under as they arrive in Israel. At some point, this goes back, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, at some point someone in that organization said, you know, we need to give these people a more balanced perspective. So of the 3 months that they were with Palestinians, they spent an hour with me. Balance. Okay?
Wow.
Well, I did this a few times, and then frankly, I was so sick to my stomach, I couldn't meet them anymore. And I have a very dear friend in Efrat who took over, and he was meeting with these people for a while, because he has, you know, I don't know, nerves of steel that I don't have. But anyway, but I'll never forget one encounter where I had this group in Tekoa, which is a modern Jewish community. And also, it's a biblical community. Amos the prophet was from Tekoa, so what better place to kind of put that all together, you know? And I'm speaking to these people, giving them the story and the background of what is the settlement movement, and I start talking about Abraham and God's promise to Abraham and all that. And one of these people there raises her hand and she says, yeah, but Abraham had 2 sons, Abraham and Ishmael. Don't you think that they should divide the land, you know? And so I pulled out my Bible and I read to her where God, I said, well, you know, it could be, but that's not what God thought, you know? And I read from the Bible where God says specifically to Abraham that it is through Isaac that your blessings will be inherited, that this land will be passed to Isaac, not to Ishmael. And not only that, Ishmael gets his own blessings in his own land, not this one. And she made this face, and she said, well, if you take that literally. Okay, so this is not only a problem of replacement theology, this is a problem of interpretation of the Bible. Is this a book that we need? Now, these are Christians. I'm not talking about secular people. They believe in God, they read the Bible, and they take a completely different message out of it. Now, people were talking about peace today. Peace is a really fabulous word until it's been manipulated and tarred. Okay? So you have a lot of Christians out there who, of course, and I say this with great reverence for the Christian message that teaches of Jesus, who taught peace and who taught kindness and love for fellow man. Okay? And so there are Christians who take this message and say, Israel is the bad, evil that is persecuting the Palestinians, and we as Christians need to follow the example of Jesus and bestow love and everything, blessings on the Palestinians, because the Jews are awful. Now, this is coming from 2 independent places, I think. One is a very secular message that is saying Jews are colonials, that the Jews have no business in Israel without respect to the Bible. That Jews are interlopers. It's the Palestinian narrative. The Palestinian narrative has nothing to do with the Bible, of course. They reject. What is the Palestinian narrative? A bunch of European Jews woke up one day and decided to steal the Palestinian land. This is, and so you have Christians that are essentially espousing this narrative coming from a position of, well, the Palestinians are the downtrodden. And we are Christians who need to look after the downtrodden. Okay? How does that link up with replacement theology? Because the only way they can possibly take that narrative is if at the same time they can believe that this land of Israel, people of Israel deal is dead. Finished. God's finished with the Jews and all that. But they both work together. And I think when you are, especially today, looking at young people, and I'm sure you as Christians know this much better than I do, because I am reporting what I hear from my Christian friends. The challenge that the church has today in keeping even churches or organizations that call themselves, and who really are Christian Zionists, or churches or organizations that have, thrown replacement theology out the window. The challenge they are having with young people. Why? Because young people, even young people who are going to church and who are families who believe deeply and educated their children in all the right ways, but those children are still being exposed to this very secular, humanistic kind of narrative that doesn't take into account the biblical narrative that this land was designated for the Jewish people by God. And this is a huge challenge that every church has. And I think, in that sense, replacement theology is coming back in through the back door of a lot of places that have already rejected it, and it's coming in because of the secular humanistic influence. And so, if I'm turning to you today and I'm answering your question, what it is that you can do, I think you have to arm yourselves, and I'm addressing Christians now. Jews, well, I don't know. How to talk to Jews, that's a whole different problem. Believe me, it's a problem I, thank God, haven't dealt with in a very long time. I love talking to Christians. And I like talking to your kind of Christians. People like as I said, we're from the same place. We have different faith, yes. But there's nothing I love better, and some of my friends here on my panel can attest to that. Nothing I love better. We open a Bible, and yes, Becky, Christians and Jews should be talking together about the things that mean the most to them, and opening a Bible together, and a Christian will tell me, this is how I read that verse, and I will say, well, this is how I read that verse, and all this is great, as long as I'm not trying to tell a Christian, don't believe that, and the Christian's not trying to tell me, don't believe that, right? We have a great conversation, and we can learn from one another. But I think that when we have that kind of commonality of being able to read the Bible together and have this conversation, you, though, are going to have the challenge to talk to people that you can't open the Bible and see things exactly the same way when it comes to Israel. But you can open your Bible, and that does give you a platform. You are both in a church. You both believe in Jesus. You both believe in certain basic tenets of Christianity. That gives you the ability to say, now, you're a Christian, I'm a Christian. I think you need to go back and read Genesis 12, for example, and read what it really says. And go back to, like, what you said, Becky, what you were saying, Donna, what Rabbi Truly was saying, the Protestant Reformation. What was that all about? Go back, open your Bible, read the book without filters and glasses on. And that's something very important that you can do on replacement theology and then bring in the biblical narrative. That is our narrative. Explain to Christians how Jews are seeing this, and that when Jews are coming back to the land of Israel, they're not coming back to occupy somebody else's land. They're coming back to take their part in God's prophecy and doing what we believe God wants us to be doing. And that's very important. But the second thing you need to do, you've got to make yourselves educated on the secular issues. You've got to be able to address the legal issues under international law. You have to be able to address the historical issues. The Balfour Declaration is a hugely important document that laid the foundation for the British Mandate, for the League of Nations, for the United Nations, all the legal documents that address Israel, that call for, and I quote, close Jewish settlement throughout the land of Israel. None of that has ever been changed, and we need to be able to address that. And I'll just include this. We put out a booklet called Israel's Story and Maps.
It's
This
awesome.
is secular. This is history. This is short and brief. I brought a few with me. I have them outside. We give them away to whoever asks. Get a hold of this, and if we run out there, because I didn't bring enough, unfortunately, for all of you, pick it up. Just get online. You need to get these booklets, learn them, memorize them, and then hand them out to whoever will be listening. That is what you can do.
Amen. Thank you. And just so you know, that the first panel actually covered a lot of the things that you just hit on. So we've already gotten that exhortation, so that was a good confirmation for us, yeah. Out of the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses, yeah. Let everything be established. Tommy Hayabel is doing amazing work organizing Christian volunteers to harvest the fields and vineyards in Samaria, which in itself is miraculous and historic. But you have also just published a groundbreaking statement exhorting Christians to stop trying to steal Jewish identity. You're really at the forefront of this movement. 2 questions. Where do you see it headed? And what surprises might God have in store for Israel and the world?
Wow, and we only have 2 minutes, right?
Yeah, I know. And we're going a little bit over, so we won't have questions here, but they'll be around after for sure.
Yeah, I've really been blessed by what's already been said, and I don't know, ever since Gideon said something, I just want to let him know my fierce resistance against the diet. Missionaries are just totally unacceptable. You can't, nothing more obnoxious than having people come up to you that don't know you and just, share their belief, about health and things like that. It's just unacceptable. Can we just build on that? Just discussing about this.
It's a very weighty issue.
It's a weighty issue. This shows just how callous we can be each other. For me, I guess where are we going? This whole movement is obviously still very fresh for me because growing up in Tennessee, rural Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, the farming community, we didn't have a lot of synagogues. We didn't have any synagogues, and there was no Jewish people explaining their biblical view. I didn't have Israel Medad to help us understand his view, which is sometimes unorthodox, by the way. Just to forewarn you. But these relationships with the Jewish people have been critical because even our Bibles talk about the Jewish people have carried the oracles of God, and we have to recognize that they have these key positions. And I think for us is recognizing our position as the nations, and we're in a real identity crisis. I know we have so many. I think Rebecca was talking about the 36,000 denominations and all of those. There's an identity crisis, obviously, that is developed within Christianity. And how do we deal with that identity crisis? The Balfour Declaration, I think, was amazing in that, just like the other, they were called restorationists, the Zionists that came before modern day understanding of Zionism came about, but they were very much understanding that the return of the Jewish people was going to bring Jesus, and there was one huge motivation for the whole thing for Christian Zionism. It was amazing, though, that in light, because most of us in Christianity for the last 2,000 years have seen the desolation of Israel, the persecution of the Jewish people, and we determined that God had left Israel and had left the Jewish people, and that was our reality, because that was what we saw. But now we're seeing something really beautiful. Something's changed, and it is an amazing thing to see Balfour and Heckler and the Ten Boom family, even before Zionism was a word, that they carried this understanding, this mysterious understanding that one day God was going to do something. They didn't know exactly how. It was interesting that Heckler actually pulled Herzl into his apartment one day. Was the first time he actually met him. He invited him to his apartment, and he lays out this whole map of Israel on his floor. To explain to Herzl that what about Israel. And of course, Heckler didn't take on any kind of missionary, even though he was a missionary. Never talked to Herzl about converting or anything, but just wanted Herzl, knew that Herzl had this role of carrying out of this prophetic destiny on him, and the words he was speaking were so strong that Heckler put the map of Israel down and said, and actually told him exactly where the temple was going to be built, in Bethel. And because he calculated that the temple, he was a mathematician, so he figured, that through his calculations that the center of Israel was Bethel, and he told Herzl, this is where, and Herzl's like, what's a temple? He wasn't obviously a religious man, probably didn't know a lot. But it was interesting that Heckler was helping him and telling him and making Herzl feel like, when I'm with Heckler, I feel like a prophet. I feel like, wow, I'm doing something really big. What is our role? Our role here is to be the Isaiah 52, the how beautiful are the feet of those who come, and to share or to say the good news, this beautiful message of Israel, and to see it and to say to Israel, your God reigns. This is a thing I think as far as our volunteers and the people that are coming back to the mountains of Israel as Christians. But I think we have to also understand that in our own faith, the one thing that we have to understand here is that, and move to a critical position is, because for the Jews, most of them feel like, I'd say I don't speak for every Jew, but a lot of Jewish people feel like that Christianity just needs to be eliminated altogether. It's not a viable religion. There's a lot of theological issues and theological problems. And so I'm speaking to a room here. I'm assuming most of us are Christians here. And so we have this problem. We have this elephant in the room, and we have to deal with those things. First of all, Christianity has to come back to its understanding that Jerusalem is the place that God chose to put his name.
Amen.
This is a critical part of the problem with Christianity. And one of the problems is it's not just a once-a-year declaration or recognition. The issue is that it needs to be, and I want to say this very fervently, that we need to preach this like every time somebody's in the pulpit. The understanding that God is chosen a place to put his name. And this is one reason why I think we have this 30,000 different denominations. We've lost our bearing, we've lost our compass. Israel, or Jerusalem, is the compass that we need to focus on. And thank God that the Jewish people didn't lose that compass, that they didn't lose that place of praying towards Jerusalem. We lost it a long time ago. Christianity, and unfortunately, many of you in this room right now, we don't have the zeal. When Jesus was coming to the temple, he started turning the tables. He wasn't turning the tables because he hated Jews. He was turning the tables because of the corruption in the Jewish temple. And it actually took an Orthodox Jewish man to even actually tell me that it wasn't really in my understanding to know that this is what Jesus was doing. And the one thing that he says as he's doing this, he says, "You will not make this place, this house, a den of thieves, because this shall be called a house of prayer for all nations." Now we have to choose right now as Christians whether or not we actually believe the one who we say we believe in. Do we believe that statement? Because if we believe that statement is a reality, and it was a reality, then somehow in the crux of that, then the crux of this really right now decision that we need to make here is whether we're going to follow this Jewish man and give credibility to our faith. And I'm not saying this, and I know when Jews hear this, and Sandra's kicking me right now. But no, I'm just kidding. But I'm saying this, that Jews are uncomfortable, obviously, with us trying to give credibility to Christianity. It's a problem. And it's a problem that's got to stop. And how is it going to stop is when we start holding the same values and the same desires, because if we are going to walk in our faith in Christianity, then we should be yearning for the temple to be rebuilt. Because we have not seen, and the question is right now, we have not seen the house of prayer for all nations established. And how many of us think that we need to stop before it's done? then how many of us believe as Christians that it's part of our responsibility, our collective effort? Let me just say one other thing, is that the only time in Christianity that we saw the Holy Spirit move was, and you'll be familiar with this, and you all understand this, the only time we saw the outpouring of the Holy Spirit happen was when we were in one accord in one place. And where was that place? In Jerusalem, in the temple. If our faith saw, it's one time, one opportunity to see that the Holy Spirit was going to fall, pour itself out, to see the power of God manifested like we've never seen it before. And what do we do? What's our place? We're going to move away from now? We're going to think that the Holy Spirit's going to show up in Brownsville or some other Toronto? No. This house will be a house of prayer for all nations. It will be called this. And every nation is going to understand that. Every nation is going to be moved. But it's our job right now to initiate this move. If the people in this room would get a hold of the work that needs to be done, there are rabbis right now that are so excited about the nations coming. Rabbi Malamed in Harbor High, so excited. He sees the harvesters out in the field, the volunteers out in the field, and he weeps because he knows. Just a few months ago, he told me, he said, Tommy, we would like to build a 30-story tower hotel for all the Christians who are making a pilgrimage to come and be, and we want it to be a prototype for the settlements in Judea and Samaria. And I'm looking at him going, really? You know, I'm really afraid to have that many Christians coming to the this is going to be but wow. Here's an Orthodox rabbi going, we cannot have this temple. We cannot have the divine presence. We cannot have the Messiah who sits on the throne of David until this. What are we waiting for? We're waiting for the nations. We're waiting for the nations to get engaged. And it's not verbal, because all the atrocities, all the horrible things we committed against the Jewish people, all the things the breach that happened between us and our brothers and our sisters, it happened physically. We did it with our own hands. Or we didn't do it. Or we didn't do anything. We were just indifferent. The physical reality of what's about to happen is going to have to take our feet. It's going to have to take our hands. It's going to have to be a physical action. Your statements of faith don't mean crap. Sorry, I'm not allowed to use that word. I couldn't think of anything. I wanted to say something else. Unless you put feet on this, unless we decide to move forward and get this, when pastors begin to preach it, when teachers begin to teach it, just like those in the New Testament. Mary danced when she heard that the covenant with Abraham, we need to define the covenant with Abraham. What is it? The covenant made with Abraham was about this place and these people.
Amen.
These people.
Amen.
She was dancing because God remembered the covenant that he made with Abraham. Zechariah was saying the same thing. Hannah even said in saying that I want to tell people, I only want to speak to those who are looking for the restoration of Jerusalem. I'm looking for those who are looking for the restoration of Jerusalem. And how many of us? Because if I walk in St. Louis right now, there's not a church. Where is that church? Here, it seems like we're getting a false reality here. Because here, it seems like there's millions of Christians that are getting this. The reality is we need to take it to the nation. We need to get engaged, and we need to make this, we need to be intentional, and it can't stop until we get this message out. The reality, this will be a house of prayer for all nations, is what every Jew is desiring to happen. Every religious Jew desires to see this happen. And what is our response to that? No, it's not. We can put our temples in here. You see, a Jew, to understand, I'll just close with this story, is that the Jewish people, because I have this said to me all the time, that, Tommy, what do you mean a temple in Jerusalem? The temple is in us. And I heard a Jewish person who does microcalligraphy, and she had done microcalligraphy, and you've seen these paintings, and if you've been in Jerusalem at all, you've seen these paintings, and only the Jews can do microcalligraphy. You're not going to see Christians doing microcalligraphy. The word is just not enough. The Jews have that love for the word to paint, whole books in a picture. And she did a picture of the wall, and she was demonstrating, or she was speaking to us, and she said, when I did this of the Kotel, I realized that every Jew understands that the temple of God is in us. You see, what we have missed is that the temple of God in us means that we have a desire, a huge desire to see the temple of God in Jerusalem established.
Amen.
When we get that, when we understand that, then this whole world is going to be turned upside down. It's waiting on us. It's waiting on the nations now to engage in this battle for Jerusalem. And you guys are in it. And I don't want to be discouraging, because you're the front line, you're the warriors. But don't take this as a passive thing. Don't take this as a once-a-year deal. This is your job. This is your calling. And I appreciate Rebecca and Sandra, and I appreciate all the things that they've done, and Bob, you guys just getting out there and being doing something. And we all need to engage in it. We all need to engage. This is what God's doing. This is not about a statement. This is about a move of God. How many of you in here are seeing a move of God? We're seeing a move of God, and we're still running over here to this statement that needs to be made. And we're not even recognizing the visitation. We have it in our own life. We do not recognize the visitation. There's a visitation of restoration happening right now.
Amen.
We need to walk in this.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, I felt an impartation in that. Tommy Waller and his family are so dedicated to this work and this effort, and each and every one of you are so dedicated that you're here, but there's more, and so I just thank God that He's going to continue to expand our faith and our knowledge and our desire and our abilities to enter in the appropriate way to stand alongside our Jewish brethren here in the land. And so thank you so much. We don't have time for questions because we have to eat. And we'll have 1 hour for lunch, okay? And just thank you again so much for being a part of this.